In Matthew 24, we'll pick up our reading at verse 32. I'll read from verse 32 of Matthew 24. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth may pass away, but my words will not pass away. But concerning the day and the hour, no one knows. Not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark. And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one left. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is the servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and begins to beat his fellow servants and eats and drinks with drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and put him with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, that's pretty extreme, cutting him in pieces and put him with the hypocrites. We'll think about that in a little while, but cut him into pieces. There, Jesus being pretty stern, it looks like, being very, very stern. I thought about starting today by asking y'all for a raise of hands on who locked your doors last night. But then I got to thinking, you might not want to reveal that. If you do not lock your doors that night, you might not want to reveal, so we won't go there. But I'm just guessing. I have a pretty good idea on a percentage basis of this group here. How many of you probably locked your doors last night? But many of you probably work around the house and you're in the kitchen or you're putting in a light bulb or doing something, and you probably go about your activities during the day somewhat with doors unlocked. Now, granted, these days things are changing, and that's not altogether all that safe either. But if we think about that image, if the homeowner knew the day and the hour that the thief came, they probably come at night, mostly under the cover of darkness. You probably lock your doors at night, because that's when they sneak around and want to break in. Of course, nowadays there's all kinds of problems with leaving your doors open during the day, because the days are getting so much better, of course, the times that we live in. Jesus wants his disciples to be alert and to be prepared for His coming. Now, the immediate context we have to consider is this tribulation period. So this is a good passage for us today to remember a principle, especially about the end times. What difference does it make in my life? We might think. I mean, it's good to know our Bibles. As I said last week, it helps us to know our Lord and our God. It helps us to know our Bibles better about some things that are going to transfer into or transpire in the days to come. But what difference does it make really today? Well, this is a case today where Jesus, and we want to keep our context here, Jesus is specifically speaking to people that are living in that tribulation time. But we can gain principles from that teaching for today. And we want to be careful we don't slip in and say, well, Jesus is talking to disciples on how they're to live in this day. That's the immediate context, as I say. We want to be careful about that. Because He's just talked about the abomination of desolation coming to the temple. And all of this cosmic phenomena that comes with His return. He speaks of how evil people will be. He talks about nation rising against nation. You'll hear wars and rumors of wars. Many being falling away. These verses we've looked at before. Those beginning of the birth pains He talks about. They'll deliver you up. In verse 10, and then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because of lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And all of those things that we've looked at already, well, all of these things didn't take place in the first century. Some would like to have all of Matthew 24, 25 completed in the first century, AD 70. Problem is, context tells us these things didn't happen in the first century. Well, all the stars and all this cosmic phenomena that I'm mentioning here. So it tells us that this is a future period of time that Jesus is talking about, an unheard of period of time. One that's described very well in Revelation, chapter 6 through 19. So that's our immediate context. This passage will be a good reminder for us about this kind of attitude. I'm good with Jesus. I know Jesus. I'm good with Jesus. I've got it down. And living in ungodly ways. There's going to be a lesson here for us in this time. He's teaching them. He's leaving a message for those alive at that tribulation period of time. When you see these things, you should be alert when you see these things. No one knows the day or the hour, but the general time period. When you see these things, we've discussed in the previous 2 weeks, when you see these things, this is generally what's going to happen. You'll have some kind of tip-off. But no one knows the day or the hour. It'll come at a time you don't expect. So be alert. Now, this side of all of that, we are waiting the rapture of the church. Now, those tribulation people, they have an advantage over us a little bit. They see all of this chaos going on. And they say, it's a sign. Jesus says it's a sign. Don't know the day or the hour, but it's a sign. Something big is going to happen. And you would think they would say, all of this is just too much. We have Bibles that have been left for us to read. It's just too much. We better get ready. Although there'll be many, many people that won't get ready. But that's what I'm saying is that's kind of an advantage. You think of that as an advantage. The rapture of the church, we have none of it. It can happen anytime. Right now. This afternoon. This evening. There is no more sign to come before God snatches away, or if you prefer, translates His church. So there's part of a lesson for us. Jesus is teaching us some urgency here. Verse 44, therefore you must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. People living at that time, make sure you're ready. And the wicked servant wasn't ready, but make sure you're ready. Principle is for us today, and we could go to other places in Scriptures, of course. You may know this well if you study your Bible, that we are to be ready today. We are to be ready today. And this is emphasis on us living today, or it reminds us. The emphasis is end times, but it reminds us that we are to be ready today. So he says, learn from the fig tree. As soon as you see these signs, all that means, as soon as you see the signs of leaves coming out, it means summer's coming. We've just had that here. Trees leaving out. You know summer's coming. It's not winter's coming, summer's coming. There's a sign. And so you know that. So when you see these signs I've just talked to you about, well, you'll know that the time's coming. He says in verse 33, so also when you see all these things, when you see all these things, well, what things? The things he's just talked about. The things that I mentioned a moment ago. We looked at previously in chapter 21. When you see all of these things, you know that He is near at the very gates. Be ready. Be ready. So there's that context of the tribulation period. Now, what generation? He says, I tell you, truly I say to you, or amen, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Well, what generation is he talking about? Well, the people who see the great signs of the great tribulation. This generation has been a difficult phrase. And there's pages upon pages and pages and pages and pages that have been written about this over decades and centuries. Some want that this generation, just so that you're aware, some want that this generation to mean the generation of the disciples that Jesus is talking about. That word generation can also mean evil people, wicked people. A generation, a type. A type. The word, if you did a word study on it, you'd see that it can mean a type of people. So Jesus might be saying that this generation, this type of people, this type of people that he's describing this time, well, they won't pass. That generation that won't pass this wickedness. But it seems that to me and many that the plain indication of it is that it's the generation he's talking about at that time. This generation. So he's describing something that's happening at an unknown point in time in the future. And now listen, are you hearing me? It's like Jesus talking and saying, this is how it's going to happen. Now listen, this generation is going to see all these things happen. I think that's the meaning of it, as well as the wickedness part of it, both of them together. I don't see how it could be possibly in AD 70 or the first century, but some scholars I highly respect do think so have to walk cautiously there, but I don't see how it could possibly be. I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And as I have just said, all of these things hadn't taken place yet. So that's why it doesn't compute with me to think first century. All of these things is sometime in the future. They'll be seeing the signs, but that'll be a wicked generation as well. That'll be a wicked time. As highlighted with the mention of Noah, concerning the day and the hour, no one knows. Okay, we're clear on that. Not even the angels, nor the Son of Man, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, well, what were the days of Noah? The days of Noah were a wicked time. The evil, exceedingly evil period of time. God just wanted to put an end to everything. And the flood came, and that's what He did, except for Noah and his family. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. For in those days, before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and all of the other things he mentions there. And then in verse 39, they were unaware until the flood came. He could have said they had been taken away. They were swept away. Where were they swept to? They were swept into judgment. Noah and his family were preserved on the ark, the ark of God, and it's been commented on frequently. You may have heard that Jesus is our ark. The flood of God is coming, and make sure you're on the ark of Jesus. Those people are swept away into judgment. So it will be with the coming of the Son of Man. So the second coming will be a time of judgment. We have to realize, we want to realize, pretty plain there. They were unaware until the flood came. Just as we were doing a deep dive on Noah, that's a very strange thing to me. The Scriptures say Noah was a righteous man, a preacher of righteousness. So he preached to how many, we don't know. But he lived a long time. So a lot of people heard from Noah. And they saw him doing something very, very strange. Building an ark. It wasn't meant for speed. It wasn't meant for beauty. It was meant for function. He's doing something very strange. And Jesus says here, and they were unaware until the flood came. Wow, unaware. We might want to call that spiritual blindness. Some kind of evidence right in front of the people, some of the people anyway, but they were unaware. They couldn't make sense of it. And God's going to judge the people and did judge the people, and He swept them away. It's an important picture, as I'm trying to emphasize here. God swept them away in the waters, and Noah was protected. They were swept away to judgment. So this helps us in understanding this passage. It just continues. Then 2 men will be in a field. One will be swept away. The ESV says taken. You can put swept away there. One will be taken and one left. 2 women are grinding at the mill. One will be swept away. One will be taken and one left. Where are they being swept away to? Generally speaking, it's on the overhead. They're swept away into judgment. That's the context is the previous verse. They all were swept away. They swept all of them away. So it will be with the coming of the Son of Man. I'm emphasize that and point that out to you in this very intricate passage. One will be taken, one left. 2 women there, one taken, one left. Context, swept away into judgment. Some have looked at this passage and tried to develop a theory of the rapture of the church at this point. Those who would believe that the rapture was not pre-trib, but that was post-trib, they'd agree there's a rapture, but post-trib would go right here, just so that you know that that's what a post-trib view likely is going to point out is this passage. Except the rapture of the church, the people are swept away. You're swept away, not to judgment. You're swept away to heaven. You're translated to heaven. This is the exact opposite. In the context of Noah and the people being swept away, the one left behind is going to enter into the millennial kingdom. They're going to go into the millennial kingdom, same as you will be, but they are already on the earth and haven't died because of their faith or been martyred for their faith. Some will be swept away and some will remain. When you see all of these signs, get ready because this is going to happen. So the second coming is a time of severe judgment. It seems to me plain from the mention of Noah in the previous verses. Therefore, stay awake. There you go. There's our watchfulness. Be watchful. Stay awake. For you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. Stay awake. One of the ways we stay awake, as I've already mentioned, is that we have continually in mind being a light to the world. Wherever God has placed you, whatever gifting He's given you, whatever area of responsibility, whatever season of life, whatever station of life that you're in, being a light in that situation, consciously thinking about that will help us to stay awake. But we don't know what day the Lord is coming. But know this, if the master of the house had known what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake. And we would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Again, emphasizing the hour is not known. So the picture of what Jesus is laying out in that time, in that tribulation period of time, going to be like the days of Noah. In the days of Noah, of course, the people were filled with wickedness. Jesus mentions here they're eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. Those things don't necessarily need to be wicked. Any of them could be, I suppose, but they don't necessarily need to be wicked. But these people were so absorbed in their day-to-day life, they're so absorbed in their everyday interests that they neglect the weightier things concerning Jesus Christ. In the days of Noah, they neglected the weightier things concerning God. They're so preoccupied with the busyness of life and the revelry, perhaps, of life, that they just think it's a foolish old man over there building an ark, and they don't listen to someone like Noah. Well, in that time, they'll be so absorbed with their things that they consider important, weightier matters in their own mind, but not the true things that are really important. We wouldn't have to go very far, would we, in the Bible to be warned about that for our time that we live in. Be careful. Be careful about what we place our importance on. They're so absorbed in their material pursuits, their material engagements. Could be good, could be bad things of life. Certainly a wicked generation, a lot of wickedness, but not everything probably was wicked. But they're so concerned with it that they weren't part of the rescue. That's the attitude that's going to take place at that time. Be ready. Be watchful. Be alert. That's going to be the attitude that takes place before the rapture. Going to be too concerned about the pursuits of daily life. Could be a number of good things, but too concerned about living this life than to really be concerned about Jesus. As Jesus lays out this picture, the people in Noah's day were not prepared for what came. When the door shut on the ark, it was over. There's going to be a day when the door, so to speak, shuts and it's over. No more opportunities. The attitude when Christ in that moment, unannounced, translates His church is going to be that people are absorbed in their daily pursuits. All manner of things pursuing. A lot of evil, a lot of good too. Pursuing them, but not ultimately good in the eyes of God. They're not being watchful. We're not being watchful, perhaps. Could happen at any moment, at any point in time. Now, it's interesting to think of this picture that I've tried to draw in this way. The future of Christ's return is certain. That's not a question here. Shouldn't be in our mind. Christ is coming. When? The day and the hour is a question. The end time is certain. The day and the hour is uncertain. Here's the question. How does that combination, certain to happen, unknown day and hour, how does that combination impact your life? That's a principle for people living in context in the tribulation, but that's a principle for living today. The call of Jesus, the return of Jesus, the call, the translation of His church is a certainty. The day and the hour, we don't know. How does that affect you? If you knew, for example, Jesus was going to physically return, we know Jesus by His Spirit is always with us, with His believing people. If you knew specifically, and let's just say for the sake of example, I won't try to spout heresy here, but let's say that Jesus was going to return at 12 o'clock today. What would change in your life? Would that conversation you had today, this morning, before you came to church change? would some attitude maybe that you had yesterday or the day before, the way you conducted yourself at work this week, how does the combination that He really is going to come? He's going to come, He's going to return, but He's also going to call His church. And you surely don't want to go through all of this, do you? He's going to call His church to be with Him, but you don't know the day and the hour. How does that change your life? Does it? It could be that for a lot of Christians, it doesn't change their life. They're a Christian in name only. Why do you think these things are in the Bible? Why do you think God put end times in the Bible? Well, so that we can know Him. I already talked about that. We can know something about Jesus. We can know something about the future. God's not too concerned about you or me knowing the future. He's very concerned about you being ready when He comes. The days of Noah seem to indicate that people are too busy pursuing other interests in their life. This time's going to come at a time we don't expect. So we're to be watchful in our own life, but that these tribulation disciples, they're to be ready, they're to be watchful, ready for the any moment return of Christ. At any time. Be ready. How do we be ready? Here's an old word, haven't mentioned it for at least a couple months. Cultivate. We have to cultivate our spiritual life. We have to weed out the things that will dull our minds concerning Christ. We have to weed out the things that would pull us away and make us inattentive to the things of Christ. We want to remove things that make us insensitive. We want to grow in our sensitivity. How do we be ready? Weed those things out that make us insensitive. It's interesting in the passage here, he mentions the wise servant, verse 45, and then verse 48, the wicked servant. Both are ones that he sets out as being responsible or accountable for the duties that are given to them. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? This servant had a particular task to give the food at the proper time. You and I have been given a particular task. As I say, your station of life, your particular task. We're always to be ready in a general sense, all of us, to be light to the world, to be in conversation with God, prayerful towards the things of God, prayerful to God, listening to God, speaking to God. We're to be ready to help other people where they need help. These general things for Christians, be in fellowship with one another. But you've been given a specific task, much as this servant's been given a specific task. Give their food at the proper time. That servant will be blessed when the master will find so doing. He'll be doing that task. Doing that task of ministry wherever you're stationed. But if that wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and then begins to beat the servants and eats and drinks with drunkards,
Well, the master will come on a day when the servant doesn't expect it, at an hour he does not know, and there will be judgment. And he'll throw him snatch him away, put him away into the place with the hypocrites. Interesting there, if we let our eyes look at verse 48, but if that wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and then he begins to live in this ungodly way. Jesus doesn't need to fill in all the blanks, does he? He can say, beat his fellow servants and eat with drunkards, and we get the point. The evil servant kind of taking advantage of the opportunity. My master is delayed. So, this message is very pointed for the people that are living in the tribulation. There's some information here that will really help them navigate that time. But what difference would it make today on this point, on this principle? Jesus is delayed. He hasn't come for 2,000 years. He's probably not going to come tomorrow. So what difference does it make? I imagine Jesus, someone saying in their mind, I imagine Jesus is not going to come this week. He's not going to come while I engage in this particular activity. He's not going to come while I engage in this kind of conversation. He's not going to come while I do all kinds of things in this world, as the generation of Noah did. That wicked servant disregards God. That wicked servant disregards the fact that the master is coming. He's making an assumption here. My master is delayed. I have a little kind of permission here. I wouldn't want to be beating servants and eating and drinking, partying with drunkards when my master came back, but he seems to be delayed. I think I'll risk it a little bit. He disregards God, the responsibility that he had been given, disregards the influence of he's surely coming back and we don't know the hour. He disregards that, disregards God. He's living in a way that is described by Jesus. Living in that way is an evil or a wicked servant. Evil servant. One of our views on evil, defining evil, what it is. Well, one of the primary ways we could define evil is disregarding God. But even further than that, disregarding the return of God. Disregarding Jesus Christ. Not living as He's called us to live as disciples. Not living as a wise and faithful servant. Not living in the holiness that God demands of His disciples. I could just imagine a lot of people saying, He's my master. And then continue. You may even know some like that. He's my master, just as like the slave here, the servant did. He's my master. But, He's not back yet. Get a little license here and He'll forgive me tomorrow morning. And He'll come.
at an hour we don't expect. He'll call at an hour we don't expect. And it's pretty dramatic there at the end. He'll cut the person into pieces. That's judgment. There's a lack of watchfulness on this for this servant. As I mentioned before, I don't take it so much as like looking behind a building or a cloud or trying to go through the newspapers and decide, or a newspaper, online, electronic news or whatever, and trying to discern that's interesting. Our current events, the time we live in, that's interesting for sure, but it's not so much that. It's being busy about the responsibility that God has given and not taking it the freedom that, like the servant had here, the freedom that the servant had, not taking that as a license to do things God would disapprove of. That's horribly wicked. We could say that when we think these people in that tribulation time, when they disregard the fact that Jesus is coming. There'll be many that do that. When we disregard that, when those living today disregard the fact that God is going to call, has no influence on their life today, seems to me that the Scriptures would support the view that that's evil. What is evil? Disregarding God. What is evil? Belittling Jesus' claim that He is going to return. We don't know the day or the hour. So, Jesus lays out and hopefully is giving His disciples at that time, He is giving them hope and direction and encouragement. Hopefully they received it that way. Seems like they did, the way they lived their life. Hopefully for us today as well. We want to be watchful, being prepared. Taking our context, we know the context, what Jesus is talking about, that's extremely important. But there's some principle there that will apply to our life today. And that principle, these principles, all of it, will carry us right in to chapter 25 next week. Let me pray for us.